Welcome to Latina Mic Drop Podcast, the space where powerful mujeres finally get the spotlight they deserve. I'm Miriam Simon, your host, executive coach, and modern maven dedicated to helping first gen and BIPOC leaders rise with power, truth, and corazon. If you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or expected to stay quiet while carrying the weight of the work, this podcast is your reminder that your voice matters and your story deserves volume. Here we talk real leadership, real breakthroughs, and the courage it takes to step into rooms that were not built for us. This is where street wisdom meets executive presence, where we honor the women who built from scratch and push past every limit placed on us. So get ready to own your power, lead without apology, and turn your voice all the way up. This is your moment, chingona. Welcome to the Latina Mic Drop Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Latina Mic Drop Podcast. In today's episode, we're going to talk about common types of biases women face at work. And I am taking this from the Lean In organization who sends us information on what to share. And it's very important for me to talk about this because these are biases that so many women face. I have experienced many of them multiple times in many different ways from different people. And I also know the difference of when it's happening and when it isn't happening. So, as an executive, as a person who works in HR, for me, it's very important to talk about these topics because we need to be aware of them, how to deal with them, and when to know it's happening. Sometimes we have no idea it's even occurring. We have no idea we're doing it as leaders. Sometimes we have no idea that we are the person doing it. I want to be able to bring some self-awareness to the topics, especially during Women's History Month, because during this month, if we don't feel supported, we are not advocated for, we are not sponsored, we are not compensated, then what's going to happen is that we are going to feel undervalued, overlooked, and unfortunately not feel good at all. Let's take a look at some of the common types of biases women face at work. One of them is unconscious bias. What does unconscious bias mean? Unconscious bias is when there are mental shortcuts that our brains use to make sense of the world around us. We all have unconscious biases, but by slowing down and becoming aware of them, we can reduce their impact on our decisions. So these are times when we don't even know we're biased, meaning that we would recommend something without even thinking about it, meaning that something maybe has happened, and because of that we've already made a decision and it's an automatic thing that we do. This can show up in leadership. You could by mistake not even realize that you have a bias towards a person, towards a situation, a circumstance, and not even realize that it's a bias that's happening. So it's important for us to know, hey, why am I making this decision? Ask yourself, why are you making this decision? And is there something I'm overlooking? Is there something that I'm not seeing that maybe I should? That's why sometimes it's important to bring in another person and talk to them about it so that your unconscious bias doesn't make you make a decision that you will later regret or based on an unconscious bias. Let's go to the next one. Likeability bias. So likeability bias is rooted in age-old expectations. So we expect men to be assertive, so when they lead, it feels natural. We expect women to be kind and communal, so when they assert themselves, we like them less. I see this all the time, especially in positions of authority where you hold people accountable and where you hold the line and you ensure that things are going the way they're supposed to be going, or keeping a deadline, or sending reminders, you're being assertive, right? That's when you're not liked for being assertive, but yet when a male figure does that, they tend to pay attention to them. So then now, if you're a male leader and you realize that when you say it, you get a different reaction than when the female says it, my recommendation to you is to support the female leader, the female manager, the female supervisor, so that people can begin to come and the behavior changes, so that the woman leader can be taken seriously. Because if you're the male lead, you're the male supervisor, and you are the person who they continuously go to, then that's what they will continuously do, because you're teaching them to come to you instead of to the female leader, supervisor, manager. And not supporting a female leader when they keep people accountable or when they are holding compliance, that demonstrates that you are also demeaning the woman. You're bringing down her level of authority. And I don't think it's intentional. I think it's a lot of times we don't realize what's really happening here. All right, let's go to the next one. Attribution bias. So, attribution bias is closely linked to performance bias, because we see women as less competent than men. We tend to give them less credit for accomplishments and blame them more for mistakes. In a male-dominated industry, I see this all the time. And even sometimes it's a cultural thing, because I grew up with machismo, and what happens there? My brother, my uncle, my father, they were always right. It was always like, hey, what did you do to them to get them to this point? What did you do that caused that reaction? And we tend to give women less credit for accomplishments. So there has been plenty of times where I have had accomplishments, and my accomplishments have created greater results than other people. And I don't compare myself to anybody, because I am very successful and I have great results. But the reality is that you do see where a male person will do less and will be given more visibility, will be given more credit. It'll be seen as a bigger accomplishment than the woman's. And it's not just me. I see it across the corporate space with my clients, what they tell me, how they are perceived. So it definitely hurts female leaders when other leaders do this to them, because it diminishes and undervalues the employee's accomplishments. Okay, let's go on to the next one. And as I'm going through these, like, think about situations that have maybe happened, or where you find yourself in these situations, and how you can approach them. Have you approached them in a good way, or have you approached them in a way that maybe you should change the way you approach it the next time? Or maybe you need to have a self-awareness of, wait, maybe this is what's happening in a situation. Okay, let's go to performance bias. So, performance bias is based on deep rooted and incorrect assumptions about women's and men's abilities. We tend to underestimate women's performance and overestimate men's. So, in this one, right, this occurs when men are promoted based on potential, and women are overlooked even if they have the results. So this is what performance bias looks like. So women, I get it, I see it, and sometimes it's containment, where they want to hold you back and they want you to stay in the position that you're in because you're that good. Because even if you have the performance and the results, why change what's working? Even if you want to move on, even if you want to try something new, even if this may seem boring to you, right? Because we have an inclination to want to grow and to learn more and do more and be more. That's natural. That's natural for people. It's contribution, right? We want to be able to contribute and create an impact. Most people are not even chasing titles anymore. They're chasing fulfillment and chasing being valued. Okay, now let's turn to another bias, maternal bias. Motherhood triggers false assumptions that women are less committed to their careers and even less competent. So I've talked about this in previous episodes and little mini stories that I've talked about. But maternal bias is a real thing. Managers would get upset when they realized that a woman that they recently hired was pregnant or got pregnant a few months down the line. And that to me is insane. Obviously, they're going to go on maternity leave and they're not going to be in. But being a mom and equating that to not being responsible or being less committed to your career. Listen, I have sacrificed so much of my kids' time working in transportation. I work day shift, night shift, afternoon shift, every shift, 2 shifts, sometimes 3 shifts, and I wouldn't even come home when there was an emergency. So to say that women are not committed to their jobs, most of us, we don't have a support system because women are working. It's not like back in the days where you would have the mom, the grandma, right, who would stay home, and then you had somebody to watch your kids. And then when you do get a babysitter, we run a lot of risks of who's taking care of them, what's going on. Like I've talked about it, something happened to me when I was a little kid from my babysitter. There's a lot of risks that we take and a lot of sacrifices that happen to us as mothers that we make, but that does not mean that we are not committed to our jobs. And I've even lost salary increases because of it. And I was always at work. I always found somebody to take care of my kids. I always found somebody to pick them up and drop them off. Shout out to my brothers and sisters who helped me. Shout out also to my family who was there for me and all the babysitters that I had throughout the years. Now my kids are in their 20s and, thankfully they can live a different life because of all the sacrifices that I've made. And I've been able to stay committed to my career. So all you women out there who are committed to your careers and committed to your children, I get it. I completely get it. Especially if you're a single mom. I was a single mom for a little bit and that wasn't easy, but I knew that I had to go to work in order for my kids to have food on the table, for us to have shelter. So how could you not keep a job? You got to feed these kids. You got to give them a house to live in. There's just no way that we're not. And of course, we want to feel fulfilled too. And for some of us, fulfillment comes through working. And yes, being a mom as well. It's not easy to carry both. And it's a life work pendulum, like I call it. I don't call it life work balance because trust me, there were times where I wanted to be with my kids and I couldn't. And there were times where I wanted to be at work and I couldn't. So to know that maternal bias exists, hopefully now with everything that's going on, I see it less, but definitely when I was in my 20s, I definitely experienced that. Let's go to the next one. Affinity bias. So affinity bias is what it sounds like. We gravitate towards people like ourselves in appearance, beliefs, and background. And we may avoid or even dislike people who are different from us. So we saw this with the Super Bowl, right? So affinity bias, all the Puerto Ricans came out, all the Latinos came out, and you loved, and so many other people did too, right? There's so many other people too. But then there were the other people who were like, I don't speak Spanish, so I'm not going to participate. Didn't even give it a try, right? So in that big aspect, that's how you can see what affinity bias is. It means that you're just not even open to trying or even to seeing what it's about. But congratulations to everybody else who embraced it and said, hey, maybe I can speak Spanish. Maybe that is something that I can do. Maybe there is a reggaeton or perreo that I can do, right? In the workplace, it's very similar where you see cliques, and the cliques are the people that are very similar, talk the same, grew up the same, have the same cultural aspects, are around the same circles, or make the same money. When somebody is different, comes from a different neighborhood, or comes from a different background, comes from a different education, not traditional, different sexual orientation, then it's like, oh, I don't know how to be around you, and I don't know how to connect with you, and I don't know how to be there. I don't know what questions to ask. And a lot of times I see what happens here is that people are fearful of saying the wrong thing, so they just don't say it. So I would say lead with curiosity in this point and learn from them. So there's different ethnicities that I was not around when I was growing up. And what I'm doing is being curious about it. Let me learn what their culture is like and why they see things the way they see them. And let me understand it so that I can understand them, so that I can learn how to work with them, so I can flex my leadership style to who they are and what their customs are, and maybe I can expand their vision, their way of seeing things, right? And they will definitely expand mine. I'm always learning because there are always different people. There's always just different aspects. Always lead with curiosity in that sense. If you don't, and you just stick to who you know, then that's where the cliques are formed. And not a good way to run an organization or a team. Compounding bias is bias isn't limited to gender. Women can also experience biases due to their race, a disability, or other aspects of their identity. This is when you start to have generalizations. So, generalizations are when you say, oh, this person is from this particular background, so they always do this. Because they're from this particular background, you can expect this. So I would challenge that, because although, right, like for me, people have asked me, where are you from? And then I tell them, oh, you don't look Mexican. And it'll compound in different ways by then adding on what a Mexican looks like, what a Mexican woman should be like, what a woman Mexican worker is like, what a Latina worker in the workplace creates, right? So it's just like a whole bunch of things, and stereotypes can begin to come in to this. And then when you add, right, see how I was compounding female, ethnicity, background, and I didn't even add sexual orientation. And then that starts to begin to show all the different biases that people have based on all those other different things. And then if I add a disability, right, then you add in more. So that's compounding. So when so many of us have, and so many of you may have more than one, right, that's when it begins to compound, and you have various ways that bias shows up. Well, this is the Latina Mic Drop podcast, and I wanted to talk about the different biases that show up in our workplace, in our lives, even in our circles. We have to be careful about where the biases show up. And it's important to be aware of what they are and also be aware of where we are, right? It's also about self-awareness. As leaders, we have a big responsibility to not carry bias and understand what our biases are so that we can enlist help, ensure that we're asking ourselves the questions we need to ask ourselves, and continue to lead from curiosity. So thank you for listening to Latina Mic Drop. Happy Women's History Month. Well, take care. I'll see you on the flip side. It's your girl, Miriam.